Oia tētahi o ngā puke ngā matua, I roto I te whare wānanga nei, ara te whare wānanga o Aoraki. He is a Senior Lecturer of Māori Environmental Planning and Development here at Lincoln University, one of the great universities in the world. His research interests are varied and include Māori farming, Indigenous agribusiness, cultural resilience and cultural diplomacy. For the past 3 years, he has focused on the impacts of the 2010-2011 earthquakes here in Ōtautahi Waitaha, and particularly on the Māori communities. One commonality in his research has been investigating the people, places and processes by which words are turned into numbers and back again. Ko tana kaupapa, ko te kaupapa ka horehia I te rā nei, re-indigenising humanity, our role, our needs. A perfect storm of economic, environmental and social pressures now exists at a planetary scale. Within the maelstrom, sit Indigenous cultures, also under pressure but never more relevant in providing theoretical and practical alternatives for humanity. As a necessary exercise in challenging ourselves, our communities and the wider eco-social networks in which we live, some Indigenous educators seek the re-indigenising humanity. I'll leave it to him because he's the expert. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please make welcome Tākuta Dr. Simon Lambert. Simon, thank you.
Good to see you all here. Thank you for the invite. Koutou ngā mana whenua tēnā, hoi Uncle Pat, I've seen you here every morning. Outstanding. Ngā puti puti o tangamata, tēnā koutou. Raurara te rama. Ko panikiri te maunga mō Waikere Moana. Just like clicker. And sorry I hadn't been a little more present in the last couple of days, but I did go out on the field trip to the Ministry of Awesome yesterday, and I really needed that. It actually was a really uplifting experience, predominantly being spoken to by young women, many of them tauiwi, most of them not from here, and they had energy and passion to burn, and an old cynical academic like me needs that on a regular basis. Re-indigenising humanity, and as I wrote in the abstract, which I haven't read since I wrote it, I must remember to use that again. We have a whole lot of things going on in Canterbury, in this town, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, across the Pacific, on the planet, where we must start to think a little more about the future. I know we always do think about the future, but things really are coming to a head. And everything's connected. You will have conversations about the Greek economy, the Chinese stock market, California drought. All these things are connected to us as people, particularly through our economy, but as people. And all across the planet, people have concerns for their culture, their communities, what they're going to pass on to their children, what they want their children to be in the future. And we have a fundamental role as Indigenous people. I'll just run through a couple, 4 pictures here. This is a meeting of the Nation of Islam and the American Nazi Party. I'm not sure if this was before or after they murdered Malcolm X. And the punchline, of course, is who murdered Malcolm X, that group. They had the same kaupapa for that meeting. That's why they came to meet. We know there's a debate in America over race, it's constant. We know that their symbols, Confederate flag here, are up for negotiation. Greece at the moment has a left-leaning, to some quite radical left-wing government. They also have quite a radical right-wing neo-fascist wing. And for those who know the history of the 20th Māori Battalion, some of our first, in fact, perhaps our first World War II combat victims were on their sacred Mauna Olympus. And we have our own typical sort of Kiwi version of an international phenomenon. You know, they're not quite as well dressed as the American Nazis, probably couldn't cook you a good souvlaki. They have less guns than the South Carolina Ku Klux Klan, but they're there. Pauline Hanson's One Nation Australia Party, some time ago now, had about 20% popularity at their peak. They could go into a coalition with a 4, 5, 6% neo-fascist party, in the same continuum. So the American Nazis and the Nation of Islam came together because they were both concerned about the same thing, as racial purity. They didn't want their children having babies between those two different groups, so they had the same code, but they came together to talk about how to ensure that. It hasn't really worked out quite like that. Young people, bless them, will go around the world and fall in love with whoever and however they want to have unprotected sex and have beautiful, gorgeous children that will inherit this planet. The planet itself, this picture is from one of the early Apollo missions. I don't remember which one. If there's a space historian out there, by all means yell it out. Once we had that picture, we have a different interpretation of who and what we are. It looks really fragile, it's really beautiful, it's really isolated. And we're all indigenous to that speaking of Jimi Hendrix, third stone from the sun. If you're a Jimi Hendrix fan, I'm sure there's some out there. This picture was used by an American scholar, Joseph Campbell, as a way of framing some of his cordial around myth. And from that point on, we can't sort of pretend that we're all that different in a lot of ways at the planetary scale. This survey came out, or was done by Practica, published in the Listener 2010. What do New Zealanders think is important to us? Number one, for Māori, for Pākehā, for Tauiwi, relationship with the land. And independence, masculinity of expression, sports, mateship. There's some very common themes there with Australia. We're easygoing, which is sometimes good and sometimes completely the wrong way to go about things. And we've got a sense of humour, and for us as colonised people, if you haven't got a sense of humour, you truly have been screwed over, right? What we're doing here at Lincoln, as teachers, as researchers, as academics, these are some of the disciplines that us as Māori academics are working in, and of course we teach and we supervise. We do mentor, but it's a strange thing because you kind of find yourself a mentor accidentally. You're just in a position where people look to you to be doing something and role modelling your job, your career, and so on. And we talk and we argue, of course we publish, because otherwise we die in the system. We present and we have a good time. We do actually have a fairly cohesive Māori rootu here, and as I say, if you haven't got a sense of humour, you truly have lost. Now, the re-indigenising humanity, the term itself I got from a Mohawk researcher, Dan Longboat. And I heard of this through a colleague of mine, Dr. Jamie Ataria. And these were some of the ideas that we batted around as researchers, trying to frame a future approach, or an approach for the future. So there's a holistic interpretation of the planet. It's all connected. We are connected to the Chinese stock market. There are several companies on there that have land interests in this country. Most of them had their shares suspended from trading in the last couple of days, because once you plunge 10%, that's really scary, so you've got to stop selling your shares because, too much red ink. So it's manipulated. We are wanting to refocus our relationships with each other, with the land. Just like the American Nazis, Greek Nazis, our Nazis, they are looking at refocusing relationships, for better or for worse. We want to support people who think the same way. And we want to implement what we do. There's not a lot of point in thinking these things and writing and publishing and presenting if it doesn't happen somewhere out on the land or in the communities. The good thing about Lincoln is we have a very practical bent. We often say we are an applied university. There's some issues with that is in academia that your theory is actually a foundation upon which you base your research, and when you go to top grade journals, that's what they're going to hammer you on if you're not careful. You need to have some political backup if you're going to go in weak in theory. The quote at the bottom there is from Marcel Proust. They might seem like random things I pull in, but it's all going through my head, so I don't think it's that random. Remember when you were growing up, if you're my age, I'm 50 in October, which I actually am looking forward to. It's kind of licensed to be even a little bit more grumpier. Kaleidoscope. So I was born in Whanganui, and about the most sort of crazy thing you could look at as a kid there was a kaleidoscope. So looking at some of you would be too young. What's a kaleidoscope? What a kaleidoscope. And so I just grabbed some picture. So this is the sort of thing that was as a metaphor for what's going on. So these are just pretty pictures. So we are pulling all sorts of things together in our minds because the planet's already pulled them together. It's actually already a living organism. It already exists as a unitary form. Third stone from the sun. There's no guarantees. We ain't going to get hit by an asteroid somewhere along the line, but we must proceed as if we have, to coin another Nazi phrase, 1,000-year Reich to be human on the planet. This is one of the sort of practical applications that has come out of research here. This is actually a Māori postgraduate student, came down from Wānanga, Cynthia Pryor. She worked with a UC Davis researcher, Josh Veers, who I've got to know very well since then. Josh is an ecologist who does a lot of GIS, Geographic Information Sciences. They keep changing what the S means. Essentially digital mapping. Hoovering up as much data as possible, hoovering up relevant data and producing maps. First, I'm a geographer by training, alumni of Canterbury University Department of Geography. First thing you learn about maps is they're all lies, because you've got to cut stuff out. You can't put everything in. But maps are powerful. You cannot manage the environment without some sort of acknowledgement of what's there and what's next to the water, the land, the cows, where's the road, all that sort of stuff. You know what I mean. And so what Cynthia did with Josh's help was start to relabel land use. And so this is a farm on the way to Akaroa. There's the Banks Peninsula Hills in the top there. Waihora, Lake Waihora is off to the south-west there, but lower left. And relatively conceptually simple exercise. And this is the sort of thing that now when you look at a map like that, you actually can reinterpret what can be done and how it can be done. And that's the sort of thing we need to be doing to survive 1,000 years. So what's our role? And so Suzanne and I had a phone catch-up a couple of weeks ago. Suzanne's idea, maybe we should talk about what we're going to talk about, so we don't talk about completely different random things. I think that's a very good idea. What I learn and I teach, and I put it in that order because you can't teach until you've learned something, and you've got to keep learning because you can't keep teaching the same thing because things change, and students observe some of this, and you have to be fresh and relevant. And so that's why for me going to the Ministry of All Semester was really, really important. Freshen me up a little bit. The term there, holding up the mirror, again, this is a saying, a quote from Dan Longboat. Before we can go down Tail Pākehā, all these sort of nifty kaitiaki to randomly choose initially things, who and what are we and how do we propose to be kaitiaki? And here in Canterbury, the waterways are very polluted. We have, I think, as many cows as Taranaki, if not more. Rapid conversion of traditional dry land cropping, sheep, and there's still sheep around, but you can smell the new business out there. And you'll smell it here on certain days depending on which way the wind's blowing. It's an intense smell. What was that apocalypse smell? I love the smell of cow shit in the morning. That's the smell of money. That's, not even really that. That's what it is at the moment. The government's committed to that. We keep talking and we have wider and wider discussions. Most of us here at Lincoln now in the Māori research area are talking to international Indigenous researchers because we've met them, we like them, we have commonalities, we love travelling, and it's a part of developing your career as an individual. You've got to do that to survive. And also what we've started doing is drafting templates to sustainably develop our land and waters at local, regional and ultimately planetary level. Again, there's no point sort of ignoring the planetary scale because, picture again, third stone from us, that's us, that's all of us, that's the Nazis, that's everybody. But what do we need? And this is the thing that's sort of been, I've had to have a good think about this and was changing it even this morning and had a coffee and conversation with Graham this morning, which was, I needed that was very reinforcing, and thank you very much for that. This is a picture from the latest conference I went to offshore, Native American and Indigenous Studies Association annual meeting in Washington DC, and Lincoln. And I know most of my history of Lincoln from the movie Lincoln. Daniel Day-Lewis, what a wonderful actor. Another Englishman playing another American. Never ever decolonise, that's the lesson there for Hollywood. But what do we need to do? Our jobs? How do we support our students? Māori Pākehā Tauiwi. Most of my students are Pākehā, a growing number are Tauiwi, and a growing proportion of them are Chinese. And we as an institution have deliberately pitched ourselves to that market because it's expanding, they have a lot of land and water issues, and that's what we do. And we are actually looking to perhaps deliver some of that as pre-degree qualifications online, which is neat. I think that's really good. There's some logistical issues, but I think that is good. And how do we contribute to our communities? So I didn't write anymore, and I did sort of melodramatically think at 5 o'clock this morning when I woke up that I'd asked them to stop recording for the next 5 minutes. Just because you aren't paranoid doesn't mean that they're not out to get you. So what's been going on here lately? Let's bring it down to local scale. 2021 Māori staff. 5-6 of us are going through formal or semi-formal HR processes in and around our roles, our performance, what we're saying, what we do. I've sat in on 2 meetings as whānau support, incidentally both of them for Wahine Toa. One of them resulted in her dismissal after 6 weeks. She was on a 90-day contract. To us as Māori, that wasn't the issue. And the other one resulted in, it was a charge of serious misconduct and resulted in a formal letter being placed on her record. Another staff member was working from home for a period of time to have some of his cultural safety issues addressed. Last week, Tumuaki, one of the faculties here, the Agribusiness Commerce faculty, resigned his position as Tumuaki. Might shock you, but I was relieved of my duties as Tumuaki several weeks ago, and we have one Tumuaki left, and this is Jamie over in Agnes. As a researcher, I recognise and analyse patterns. You don't need a PhD to recognise and analyse that pattern. To talk about institutional racism is banal in this audience. I would be boring you and wasting our time. The interesting thing is you go out of this audience, and pretty much anywhere, and raise the issue of institutional racism, systemic racism, etc., you are greeted with silence, you invite ridicule, and you're isolated. And that's how it's being dealt with at the moment. So it's kind of a difficult space to be in to talk about saving the planet when you're primarily involved in saving your own ass. But again, I went out yesterday, Ministry of Awesome, and suddenly, you get taken out of your own stuff and you need to be placed in a positive, vibrant network. And that happens. So again, I keep facing that lesson that you're supposed to say, yeah, like that. Right? The challenge I put out there to us all is when you leave, after the Pōrapōraki, when you leave, what do you leave? Because Monday morning I'm back in here, digging salt. Great job, love my job. Students are back next week, which is, again, get the routine of lecturing. It's nice, routine is a form of security. But as people sometimes put out there quite provocatively, what would Jesus do? What would Lincoln do? What would Apira Ngāta do? And so I still think that we have space for I wouldn't say new style of leadership. I actually think there is still space for that old school leadership to come back through. One of the nifty things that came out on the webpage I saw was the word cloud. Some of you would have used this in presentations before. From the research we were doing with Tangata Whaiora post-earthquake, I did a word cloud. And what jumped out at me as soon as I took all the transcripts, popped them into this free online software thing, and it spits out a word cloud. And you can fill it. And what jumped out to me was things people know. And so I was just talking to people, mainly Whaiora, but also their support networks and whānau and so on. How did you get through the disaster? Biggest disaster that's hit this country in 3 generations. For some of them, it wasn't the biggest thing that happened that week. For many of them, they found some amusement that everyone was scrambling around, trying to get food and water and dig toilets and all that. And the things they knew were very, very simple things, whanaungatanga, manaakitanga. They didn't need a lot of support, but they needed one or two people to have their back. So the challenge I've always put out there to research proposals and the National Science Challenge process, Centre of Research Excellence processes, some of you will be involved in that, were very territorial, very dangerous. And the question I put out there, one of those 3 beer nights, beer I drink's very strong, was who's got my back? Who's got my back? And of course, greeted with silence and subsequent ridicule, etc., etc. So the things people know, our role as Indigenous educators and learners, we are actually between two different knowledge systems, to put a very broad gloss on it. And we're kind of like gatekeepers. We're kind of like a channel for communication. We filter. Although the technology now allows me to put the raw data, the interviews, the audio out online. I haven't done that, the ethics would be a nightmare. But you can do that. Right? So our role as filters is actually being undermined in a lot of ways. There's good and bad things to that. And if the planet is to have a future, here's the melodramatic ending, we must be better integrated into the system, because we are between communities who have knowledge that is needed to save aspects of what we know, and to ensure that the sort of culture that we value and support and love and want to pass on is passed on in a more vibrant, secure manner. And for those roles to be fulfilled, we certainly need people to have our backs. And so when you leave, what do you leave? Kia ora tātou, iho mā, iho tāwhito, iho ha, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā